The night Linu decided to answer a stranger's letter, she broke her own sacred rule. Never trust a man again. The last one she trusted left her parents' bodies cold in the ground while the town watched and did nothing. Now, alone on a dying Montana farm in 1887, surrounded by neighbors who spit when she passes, she's built walls higher than the mountains themselves. But loneliness has teeth, and they've been gnawing at her for 3 years. One newspaper ad, one moment of weakness, one reply that will either save her or destroy what little she has left. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The fence post cracked under Lin Yu's hammer, splitting clean down the middle instead of sinking into the frozen ground. She stood there, breath clouding in the November air, and watched the wood fall useless at her feet. Damn it! Her voice sounded strange. She hadn't spoken aloud in 4 days. The fence line stretched broken and useless across the north pasture, 40 yards of rails that had given up the same way everything else on this land had given up. The same way she should have given up 2 winters ago, when the bank man came with his papers and his sympathetic smile that didn't reach his eyes. Miss Lin, your father's debts. She'd paid those debts. Every cent. Sold everything that wasn't nailed down and some things that were. The good horses. Her mother's jade bracelet. The imported seeds her father had cherished. All of it gone into the pockets of men who looked through her like she was glass. Lin Yue picked up the split post and threw it toward the pile of other failures. It landed with a hollow thud that echoed across the empty fields. Empty. Everything was empty now. The house where her mother's laughter used to fill the kitchen. The barn where her father sang old Cantonese songs while he worked. The bed where she slept alone, staring at ceiling beams that needed repair, counting the hours until dawn when she could pretend productivity mattered. She was 26 years old and felt 60. The Montana sky pressed down, gray and indifferent. Snow would come soon, real snow, not the dustings they'd had in October. And she had 40 yards of fence that wouldn't hold a determined chicken, let alone keep the wind from stripping what was left of the topsoil. Lin Yue grabbed another post. This one sank 3 inches before hitting rock. She hammered until her shoulders screamed, until the post grudgingly accepted another inch of ground. Not enough. Never enough. You need help with that? She spun, hammer raised. Thomas Ridley stood 20 feet away, hands up, grin wide. Too wide. The kind of grin that made her skin crawl. Didn't mean to startle you. He stepped closer. Saw you struggling out here. Thought maybe... No. I haven't even said what... No. Lin Yue lowered the hammer but kept it in her hand. Leave. Thomas's grin flickered. Now that's not very neighborly. I'm trying to be friendly. You've been trying to be friendly for 6 months. I've said no for 6 months. How many times do you need to hear it? His face hardened. The false warmth drained away, leaving something uglier underneath. You know what your problem is, Lin? You think you're better than us. Chinese girl playing farmer on land she's got no business owning. Your daddy bought this place with railroad money, and everyone knows those Chinese workers took jobs from real Americans. Lin Yu's jaw clenched. My father paid for this land, same as anyone. Maybe. But he's dead now, isn't he? And you're out here alone pretending you can handle a man's work. Thomas took another step. I'm offering to help. You could use a man around, someone to look after things. I look after my own things. Do you? He gestured at the broken fence, the sagging barn, the fields that hadn't produced a decent crop in 2 years. Because from where I'm standing, you're drowning. But pride's a funny thing, especially in women who don't know their place. The hammer felt good in her hand, solid, heavy. She imagined the sound it would make connecting with Thomas Ridley's smug face. Instead, she said, Get off my property. Or what? You'll report me to Sheriff Morrison? Thomas laughed. He and I play cards every Thursday. Who do you think he'll believe? He wasn't wrong. Sheriff Morrison had made his feelings clear when her father died. Shame about Mr. Lin. He was one of the good ones, kept to himself, didn't cause trouble. You planning to stay out here alone, miss? Might be wiser to sell. Move somewhere more suitable. Suitable. Code for somewhere she'd be invisible. Somewhere her existence wouldn't remind people that Montana wasn't as white as they'd prefer. Thomas was close enough now that she could smell the tobacco on his breath. I could make things easier for you, Lin. Or I could make them harder. Your choice. Linu raised the hammer. Not to strike, just to remind him it was there. My choice, she said quietly, is that you leave now. Before I forget I'm a lady. Something in her voice must have registered. Thomas stepped back, hands up in mock surrender. Fine. Freeze out here for all I care. But winter's coming, and you're going to need help eventually. We'll see how proud you are when the snow's 6 feet deep and your firewood's running low. He walked away, boots crunching on frost-hardened ground. Linu didn't move until he disappeared over the ridge. Then she sank onto the frozen earth, hammer still in her hand, and let the shaking start. She hated that she shook, hated that men like Thomas Ridley could make her feel small when she'd survived things that would have broken him in half. She'd buried both parents within 6 months of each other. She'd learned to shoot, to trap, to butcher a deer and cure the meat. She'd delivered a breech calf in the middle of a blizzard and saved both cow and baby when the veterinarian refused to come, because it's too far for a colored farm. Chinese, not colored, she'd wanted to scream. But they didn't care about distinctions. To them, not white was all that mattered. The shaking stopped. Linu stood, brushed frozen dirt from her pants, men's pants, because skirts were useless for fence work, and looked at what she'd accomplished. 2 posts. 2 posts in 3 hours. At this rate, the fence would be done by spring, if she didn't starve first, if the bank didn't come calling again, if Thomas Ridley didn't decide to make good on his implied threats. Linu walked back to the house, a small structure her father had built with his own hands. Solid, practical. Not beautiful, but strong. Like him. Inside, the emptiness was worse. She lit the stove, more for light than warmth. Firewood was precious now, and sat at the kitchen table where her family used to gather. Her mother's chair still had the cushion she'd embroidered, chrysanthemums, because she said they meant long life and happiness. The embroidery was fading now, threads pulling loose. On the shelf above the dry sink, the newspaper sat folded to the same page it had been folded to for 3 weeks. The matrimonial news, someone had left it at the general store, and Mrs. Patterson had shoved it at Lynn with a meaningful look. Might find something useful in there, dear. A woman alone isn't natural. Linu had almost thrown it away. Almost. Instead, she'd read it. Every pathetic, desperate advertisement for men seeking wives, women seeking husbands, lonely people reaching across impossible distances for connection. One ad had caught her attention, not because it was romantic or flowery, because it was honest. Montana man, 34, seeking correspondence with a woman of strong character. I have lost everything, my wife to fever, my farm to drought, my faith in easy answers. I don't offer wealth or comfort. I offer honesty and the willingness to work hard beside someone who understands that life is not gentle. If you've survived things that should have broken you, if you're tired of pretending to be soft when you're made of iron, write to me. Elias Turner, General Delivery, Billings, Montana. She'd memorized it. Against her will, against her better judgment, the words had lodged in her mind like a splinter. I have lost everything. So had she. If you've survived things that should have broken you, she had, barely. Linu pulled the newspaper closer. In the lamplight, the words seemed to pulse. This was insane. She didn't know this man. He could be a liar, a drunk, a man like Thomas Ridley with prettier words. He could be dangerous, but he could also be telling the truth. And truth, real truth, was something she hadn't encountered in so long, she'd almost forgotten what it felt like. Linu stood and retrieved paper and pen from her father's old desk. The paper was rough, the pen older still, but her handwriting was neat. Her mother had insisted on that. Write beautifully, Linu. It's the one thing they can't take from you. She stared at the blank page. What did you say to a stranger? How did you compress years of grief and anger and loneliness into something that didn't sound like begging? The pen hovered. Then, surprising herself, Linu began to write. Mr. Turner, I read your advertisement and recognized a fellow survivor. I am a 26-year-old Chinese woman operating a failing farm in Montana. I have no illusions about my situation. The land is hard, the neighbors hostile, and my prospects grim. I do not seek rescue. I have learned that rescue is a myth sold to weak people, but I also recognize that solitude, while safe, is its own kind of death. So I write to you not because I am soft or desperate, but because I am curious whether honesty still exists somewhere in this brutal world. I have survived the death of both parents, the betrayal of a man I trusted, and the daily reality of being unwanted in a place I refused to leave. I am not gentle. I am not easy. And I will never ever depend on a man for my survival. If that doesn't frighten you, write back. Linu, General Delivery, Corazon, Montana. She read it 3 times. It was too harsh, too bitter. Any sane man would read this and flee. Good. Let him flee. Better now than later. Linu folded the letter, sealed it in an envelope, and set it on the table. Tomorrow, she'd decide whether to mail it. Tomorrow, in daylight, when she wasn't exhausted and lonely and desperate for something, anything, to change. Tomorrow. But tomorrow came with a blizzard. Linu woke to wind that screamed like an animal dying. Snow drove horizontal against the windows, piling in drifts that swallowed the fence posts she'd fought so hard to set. The temperature inside the house had dropped to where she could see her breath, and the stove had gone cold during the night. She wrapped herself in every blanket she owned and got the fire going again. It took 15 minutes and all her kindling. The woodpile outside was already half buried. She'd have to dig a path, carry in enough to last the storm. If it lasted 3 days, and November storms often did, she'd burn through a week's supply. There was no question of going to town. The roads would be impassable. She was alone, truly alone, until the weather broke. Linu made weak tea and stale bread last night's dinner. She checked the cellar, 3 jars of preserved vegetables, a sack of rice, dried beans. Enough for 2 weeks if she was careful. The chickens had stopped laying a month ago. The cow was dry. She had no income, no prospects, and a storm that might kill half the livestock stupid enough to be caught outside. This was survival. This was all it had been for 3 years. She looked at the letter on the table. Stupid. Sending it was stupid. What would this Elias Turner want with a broke, bitter Chinese woman trapped on a frozen farm? What could he possibly offer that would change anything? But the alternative was this. This house, this silence, this slow starvation of the spirit. Linu grabbed the letter and shoved it in her coat pocket before she could reconsider. The storm raged for 4 days. On the 5th day, the sun emerged and the world was transformed into something beautiful and merciless. 10 feet of snow in places, drifts that swallowed entire fence lines. The barn roof had a crack running down the center, sagging under the weight. Linu dug herself out and checked the animals. 2 chickens dead from the cold. The cow lowing miserably in the barn, hungry and frightened. She fed them what little hay remained and promised herself she'd figure something out. She always figured something out. The road to town took another 2 days to become passable. When she finally hitched her horse, the old mare her father had loved, too old to sell, and rode into Corazon, the look started immediately. Mrs. Patterson at the general store, tight-lipped disapproval. Mr. Henderson at the feed shop, eyes that lingered too long. Sheriff Morrison tipping his hat with a smirk that said he knew exactly how desperate she was becoming. Linu bought the minimum, flour, salt, a little sugar, and posted her letter before she could lose her nerve. The postal clerk, a young man named Jimmy, who'd always been kind, took it without comment. But she saw his eyes flick to the address. Billings, General Delivery. A man's name, word would spread. It always did. Let it. She was past caring what these people thought. Linu rode home under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. The sun made diamonds of the snow, and for a moment, just a moment, Montana was beautiful instead of cruel. Then the wind picked up, and reality reasserted itself. She was home by dark, fed the animals, made a thin soup, sat in her mother's chair, and wondered what she'd done. The answer came 3 weeks later. December brought cold that turned breath to ice crystals and made the ground ring like iron under her boots. Linu survived the way she always survived, one day at a time, one task at a time, refusing to think beyond the immediate. Fix the barn roof. Failed. Too much weight, too little strength. Trap a rabbit. Success. 3 days of meat. Repair the chicken coop door. Success. Kept the remaining birds alive. Avoid town. Success. She had nothing left to buy anyway. She didn't expect a response to her letter, or rather, she expected silence, which was its own kind of response. Men who advertised for wives wanted soft women, Grateful women. Women who would make them feel strong. She'd offered none of that. So when Jimmy rode out to the farm on a clear Saturday in mid-December, letter in hand, Lin Yu's first reaction was suspicion. "Mail for you, Miss Lin." She took it slowly. The envelope was thick paper, good quality. Her name written in careful script. Return address: Elias Turner, Billings, Montana. He'd written back. "Thank you, Jimmy." The young man hesitated. "Miss Lin, if you don't mind me saying, people are talking about you writing to strange men. Mr. Ridley's been saying things." Of course he had. Let him say what he wants. "Yes, ma'am. It's just, you should know. Mrs. Patterson told my mother that no decent woman would—" Jimmy caught himself. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said anything. You did me a kindness bringing this out here. Tell your mother I appreciate the concern, but I make my own choices." Jimmy nodded and left. Lin Yu stood in the snow, holding the letter, afraid to open it. Inside, with tea she couldn't afford to waste, she finally broke the seal. "Miss Lin, your letter was the most honest thing I've read in 5 years. Thank you for not lying to me. You asked if your words frighten me. They don't. Dishonesty frightens me. Pretense frightens me. People who smile while they sharpen knives frighten me. Your anger and your honesty? Those I understand. You said you are not gentle or easy. Good. I've had gentle and easy. My wife Mary was the kindest woman I ever knew. She died screaming in pain from a fever I couldn't stop, couldn't treat, couldn't do a damn thing about except watch. Gentleness didn't save her. Sweetness didn't save her. And when she was gone, all the kind neighbors who'd praised her for being such a good woman disappeared like smoke. I lost the farm 6 months later. Couldn't work it alone, couldn't afford help, couldn't keep going without her. Sold it for half what it was worth to a man who knew I was desperate and didn't care. So no, your bitterness doesn't frighten me. It makes sense. Anyone who survived what you've survived and isn't bitter is either lying or broken beyond repair. You said you will never depend on a man for survival. I respect that. I'm not offering to save you. I'm offering to work beside you, if you'll have me. 2 people pulling in the same direction can survive things that would kill one person alone. But I won't lie and say I'm doing this purely out of practical partnership. I'm lonely. I'm tired of being alone. I want someone to talk to who understands that the world is hard and doesn't expect me to pretend otherwise. If you're willing to continue this correspondence, write back. Tell me about your farm, your life, what you've survived. I'll do the same. We'll see if honesty can build something between 2 people who've learned not to trust. If you're not interested, I'll understand. Either way, thank you for reminding me that there are still people in this world who refuse to break. Elias Turner. Lin Yu read it twice, then a 3rd time. He didn't pity her, didn't offer to rescue her, didn't question her anger or tell her to soften her edges. He just answered honestly. She sat at the table until the tea went cold, the letter in her hands, something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. Not hope. She didn't trust hope, but maybe curiosity. Maybe that was enough. Lin Yu pulled out paper and began to write. Mr. Turner, your wife deserved better than this world gave her. I'm sorry for your loss. My farm is 160 acres of stubborn earth that refuses to give up completely, but won't quite thrive either. I have 6 chickens, 1 cow, 1 ancient horse, and ambitions that outpace my resources by a considerable margin. The neighbors range from hostile to predatory. The bank is patient only because they know I have nothing left to take. I survive on stubbornness and spite. Some days I think spite is all that keeps me breathing. My father came here believing in the American dream. He died believing it was a lie sold to fools. My mother tried to maintain grace and dignity in a place that saw her as decoration at best, disease at worst. She died exhausted from the effort. I learned from both of them, my father's work ethic, my mother's strength, but I also learned that this country takes more than it gives, especially from people like us. You asked about what I've survived. The list is long, and none of it makes for pleasant reading. But the worst thing I survived was loving someone who left when things got hard. His name was Daniel. He worked for the railroad, stayed with us one winter when he was injured. He said he loved me, said he'd marry me, stay, help run the farm. Then my father got sick. Daniel disappeared 3 days later, didn't say goodbye, just left. I found him in town a month after my father died. He was courting the banker's daughter. When he saw me, he looked through me like I was nothing, like I'd never existed. That's when I learned that love is a luxury I can't afford. But I'll admit your letters make me wonder if honesty might be different than love. If partnership might be different than dependence. Write back if you want. Tell me about your farm, your wife, what you lost. I'll keep reading if you keep being truthful. Linu. She mailed it the next day. This time, Jimmy didn't comment on the gossip. The response came faster. 10 days. And so it began. Through December and into January, the letters came and went like a heartbeat. Linu found herself watching for Jimmy's visits, found herself writing by lamplight when the wind howled and the house felt too empty. Elias told her about Mary, how they'd met at a church social, how she'd laughed at his jokes even when they weren't funny, how she'd believed in him even when he failed, how her death had broken something in him that he wasn't sure would ever fully heal. He told her about the farm he'd lost, 100 acres of good land near Billings, a house he'd built with his own hands, dreams of children and prosperity that died with Mary's last breath. He told her about the work he did now, day labor, odd jobs, saving every penny toward something. He wasn't sure what. Just knew he couldn't stay in Billings, couldn't walk past the places that reminded him of everything he'd lost. Linu told him about her parents, how her father had worked himself to death trying to prove he belonged, how her mother had maintained impossible standards of grace until the effort killed her, how she'd been left with land she couldn't quite work and pride she couldn't quite swallow. She told him about Thomas Ridley's threats, about the way the town looked at her, about the loneliness that was sometimes worse than hunger. She told him things she'd never told anyone. And he didn't flinch. January became February. The letters grew longer, more frequent. They weren't romantic. They were real. Two people stripping away pretense, examining the damage life had done, seeing if anything underneath was worth saving. Then, in late February, Elias wrote something that changed everything. Linu, I've been thinking about our correspondence, about what we're doing here. We're both survivors, both damaged, both wary of trust, but we're also both alive, still fighting, still trying. I'd like to meet you. Not to pressure you, not to claim anything, just to see if the honesty that works in letters can work face to face, to see if two broken people might be less broken together. There's a train from Billings to Corazon. I could come in March when the worst of winter breaks. I'd stay at the boarding house, wouldn't presume anything. We'd just talk. Really talk. And if you decide you want nothing to do with me, I'll get back on the train and that will be the end of it. But if you're willing to take that risk, I'm willing to take it too. What do you say? Elias. Linu sat with that letter for 3 days. Every instinct screamed at her to say no, to protect herself, to maintain the walls that had kept her safe, if you could call this living safely. But beneath the fear was something else, something that had grown through months of honest words. Not hope. She still didn't trust hope. But possibility. The possibility that she didn't have to be alone forever. The possibility that honesty might be enough. The possibility that she was brave enough to try. Linu wrote back with shaking hands. Elias, come find me. Linu. She mailed it before she could reconsider, and then she waited. The waiting was worse than the loneliness had ever been. Linu threw herself into work with a desperation that bordered on madness. She cleaned the house until her hands cracked and bled. She repaired the chicken coop twice, even though it didn't need repairing. She walked the fence line in the freezing March wind, counting posts, counting steps, counting anything to keep her mind from spinning. What had she done? A stranger was coming, a man she'd never met, never seen, knew only through words on paper. He could be anyone, could want anything. She'd invited him into her world based on nothing but letters that might have been lies from beginning to end. You're an idiot, she told herself, scrubbing the kitchen floor for the 3rd time in 2 days. A desperate, stupid idiot, but she kept scrubbing. March arrived with false promises of spring. The snow melted into mud that swallowed boots and turned the roads into rivers of frozen slush. Linu received one more letter before Elias was due to arrive. Linu, I'll be on the afternoon train on March 15th. I'm bringing one bag and enough money for a week at the boarding house. No expectations, no assumptions. Just a conversation between two people who've been honest with each other from the start. I'm nervous. I won't pretend otherwise. What if the honesty that worked in letters falls apart when we're face to face? What if I disappoint you? What if you realize I'm just another broken man with nothing to offer? But I'm coming anyway. Because whatever else happens, I need to know if this feeling, this sense that maybe I'm not entirely alone in the world, is real or just wishful thinking. See you soon, Elias. Linu folded the letter and tucked it in her pocket. She wore it there for 3 days, touching it whenever the panic got too strong. March 15th came cold and clear. She dressed carefully. Not her work clothes, but not anything fancy either. She owned nothing fancy. A simple dark dress her mother had made, mended in places but clean. She brushed her hair until it shone, then twisted it into a practical bun. No point in pretending to be something she wasn't. The ride to town took an hour. Linu arrived early, tied her horse at the post near the train station, and tried not to vomit from nerves. The platform was empty except for Mr. Henderson, who ran the telegraph office and always met the trains looking for packages. He glanced at Linu and smirked. "Waiting for someone, Miss Lin?" "None of your business, Mr. Henderson." "Course not. Just unusual seeing you in town, and all dressed up too." His eyes crawled over her in a way that made her skin itch. "Special occasion?" Linu turned her back on him and stared down the empty tracks. "Please let this not be a mistake. Please let him be real." The train was late. 15 minutes became 30. 30 became 45. Linu stood rigid on the platform, refusing to sit, refusing to show weakness in front of Mr. Henderson, who'd settled onto a bench and pulled out a newspaper, clearly planning to watch whatever drama unfolded. At 1 hour late, doubt crept in properly. Maybe Elias had changed his mind. Maybe he'd never intended to come at all. Maybe this had been some cruel game, a lonely man amusing himself at the expense of a desperate woman. Then she heard it. The whistle, distant but unmistakable. Linu's heart hammered so hard she thought Mr. Henderson might hear it. The train appeared around the bend, black smoke against gray sky, and suddenly this was real. In minutes, she would meet the man whose words had cracked something open inside her. In minutes, everything would change. The train shuddered to a stop with a screech of brakes and a blast of steam. The conductor hopped down, placed his step, and passengers began to disembark. A woman with 2 small children, an elderly couple, a salesman with a heavy case, a young man who looked barely 20. No one else. Linu's stomach dropped. He wasn't coming. She'd stood here like a fool, and he wasn't. Then she saw him. He stepped down last, moving carefully, a worn canvas bag in one hand. Tall. Taller than she'd expected. Thin in a way that spoke of hard work and missed meals, dark hair going gray at the temples. A face that might have been handsome once before grief carved lines around his eyes and mouth. He looked exactly like his letters, tired, honest, afraid. Their eyes met across the platform. For a long moment, neither moved. Linu saw him take her in, the Chinese woman in the mended dress, standing alone, spine straight, chin up, trying not to look terrified. Then Elias Turner did something she didn't expect. He smiled. Not a confident smile, not a charming smile. A small, uncertain quirk of his mouth that said, "I'm as scared as you are." He walked toward her, and she saw it then, the thing that broke through all her defenses. His eyes were wet. Not crying, not quite. But one tear had escaped and traced down his weathered cheek, and he didn't bother to wipe it away. He stopped 3 feet from her. "Linu." His voice was rough, deep. Nothing like she'd imagined and exactly right. "Yes. I'm Elias." He shifted the bag to his other hand, started to extend his right hand for a shake, then stopped. "I don't know what the proper, I don't want to presume. You came." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "Of course I came." "I thought maybe you wouldn't, that this was all some kind of, I came." He said it firmly, that single tear still visible on his face. "I told you I would. I don't lie." Behind them, Mr. Henderson coughed loudly. Linu had forgotten he was there. She turned and found him staring, newspaper forgotten, mouth slightly open. The gossip would be all over town by nightfall. She didn't care. "There's a diner," Linu said, turning back to Elias. We could talk there, or I could show you to the boarding house first if you want to. The diner's good." He glanced around the platform, at Mr. Henderson's undisguised curiosity, at the small town that probably looked even smaller after Billings. "Unless you'd prefer somewhere more private?" "Private doesn't exist in Corazon. People will talk no matter what we do." "Then let them talk." They walked side by side down Main Street. Linu was aware of every eye that followed them, every curtain that twitched, every conversation that stopped as they passed. Mrs. Patterson stood in the doorway of the general store, hand pressed to her chest in exaggerated shock. Sheriff Morrison leaned against the wall outside his office, arms crossed, watching with an expression Linu couldn't quite read. The diner was nearly empty. Jenny Carter, who ran it with her husband, looked up from wiping tables and froze. "Miss Lynn, didn't expect to see you today. Coffee, please, and whatever you have for lunch." "Two," Elias added, settling into the booth across from Lin Yue. Jenny's eyes darted between them. "Sure. 2 coffees. 2 lunches. Coming right up." She disappeared into the kitchen, and Lin Yue knew she was probably watching through the service window, ready to report every detail to her husband, who would tell everyone at the saloon by dinner. "You weren't exaggerating about the gossip," Elias said quietly. "I never exaggerate." "I'm starting to realize that." The coffee came quickly. Jenny set the cups down with trembling hands, clearly dying to say something but managing to hold her tongue. She retreated again, and Lin Yue wrapped her hands around the warm cup, grateful for something to do with her nervous energy. "So," Elias said. "So. This is awkward." Lin Yue almost laughed. "Yes. I thought maybe it wouldn't be. We've written so much, said so much, but sitting here looking at you, I don't know what to say. You could start with the truth. Are you disappointed?" Elias blinked. "Disappointed? I'm not what men usually want. I'm Chinese, I'm broke, I'm bitter. The whole town thinks I'm strange at best, dangerous at worst. You could get back on that train right now and no one would blame you." He set down his coffee. "Is that what you want, for me to leave?" "I'm asking what you want. I want to sit here and drink coffee with a woman who told me the truth when everyone else was lying. I want to see if the person I've been writing to is real or if I invented her from loneliness." He paused. "Are you disappointed?" Lin Yue looked at him, really looked. The gray in his hair, the scar above his left eyebrow, the way his hands, calloused and scarred, held the coffee cup like it might break. The tear that had dried on his face, leaving a faint track. "You cried when you saw me." "I did." "Why?" Elias was quiet for a moment. "Because you're real. Because I've been alone for so long, I'd started to think maybe I deserved it. And then I saw you standing there, looking exactly as terrified as I felt, and I realized—" He stopped, swallowed. "I realized you took the same risk I did. That took courage." Something in Lin Yue's chest cracked a little wider. "I'm not brave," she said. "You're standing here, aren't you? Knowing this whole town is watching, judging, waiting for you to fail? That's braver than anything I've done." The food came, stew and bread, simple but hot. They ate in silence for a while, and it wasn't uncomfortable. It was easy, like they'd done this before. "Tell me about your farm," Elias said finally. The letters made it sound rough, but I want to know what I'd be dealing with. He caught himself. "I mean, not assuming anything, just curious." Lin Yue described it honestly. The broken fences, the struggling crops, the animals barely holding on, the barn roof that needed replacing, and the house that needed everything. The debt that wasn't crushing but was always there, pressing down. The neighbors who ranged from hostile to predatory. "Thomas Ridley still bothering you?" She'd mentioned him in a letter. "He keeps his distance now, but he's patient. Men like that always are." Elias's jaw tightened. "If he tries anything, I can handle Thomas Ridley. I don't doubt that, but you shouldn't have to handle him alone." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. "You said in your letter you wanted to work beside someone," Lin Yue said carefully. "What did you mean exactly?" "Exactly what I said. I'm not looking for a woman to cook and clean while I play Lord of the Manor. I've got 2 hands and a strong back, well, stronger than it looks. I can work. I want to work. But I want to work with someone instead of alone." "For how long?" How long what? How long before you get tired of it? Of me? How long before the newness wears off and you realize you made a mistake? Elias pushed his bowl away and leaned forward. Lin Yue, I can't promise I'll never make mistakes. I can't promise everything will be perfect. But I can promise I won't leave because things get hard. I've had hard. I've survived hard. Hard doesn't scare me. What does scare you? Pretending, lying, going through the motions of a life instead of actually living one. He paused. And dying alone, having never tried again. Lin Yu's hands shook slightly. She pressed them flat against the table. I need to be clear about something, she said. I will never be what people expect a wife to be. I wear pants when I work. I curse when I'm angry. I don't know how to be soft or sweet or any of those things men seem to want. And I won't change. I don't want you to change. You say that now. I say it because I mean it. Elias's voice was firm. I watched my wife die trying to be perfect, trying to live up to everyone's expectations of what a good woman should be. She exhausted herself being gentle when she wanted to scream, being patient when she wanted to fight. It killed her just as surely as the fever did. His eyes were bright again. I don't want perfect. I want real. I want someone who'll tell me when I'm being an idiot, who'll work beside me in the mud, who won't pretend everything is fine when it isn't. Jenny Carter had returned to wipe tables again, hovering close enough to hear every word. Lin Yu lowered her voice. If we do this, and I'm not saying we are, it has to be a real partnership. Equal. I won't be owned. I wouldn't want to own you. What would be the point? You just resent me, and I'd end up alone anyway, just with someone else in the house. The town will make it hell. They're already making it hell for you. At least you wouldn't face it alone. You could find someone easier, someone white, someone proper, someone who knows how to act like a lady. I don't want easy. Elias reached across the table, stopped just short of touching her hand. Can I ask you something? Yes. Why did you write to me? Really? Lin Yue looked down at his hand, hovering near hers. Rough skin, broken nails. Working man's hand. Because I was tired, she admitted. Tired of being angry all the time. Tired of hating everyone, including myself. Tired of surviving instead of living. She looked up. Your letter was the first time anyone talked to me like I was a person instead of a problem to solve or a thing to use. You didn't pity me. You just saw me. I did. I do. This time when he reached for her hand, she didn't pull away. His palm was warm, calloused, real. Lin Yue had forgotten what a kind touch felt like. They sat like that for a long moment, hands linked across the table, while Jenny Carter nearly dropped her tray trying to see around the corner and half the town probably pressed their faces against the diner windows. I have a room at the boarding house for a week, Elias said quietly. No pressure. We can spend time together, talk more, see how it feels. And if at the end of the week you want me gone, I'll go. And if I don't want you gone, then we figure out what comes next, together. Lin Yu squeezed his hand. I should warn you, the farm is worse than I described in the letters. I didn't want to scare you off completely. I should warn you, I snore. And I'm not great at cooking, and I have nightmares sometimes about Mary dying. I have nightmares about my parents, and I'm stubborn, and I hold grudges. I noticed the stubborn part. Did you? It's one of the things I liked best about your letters. They smiled at each other, tentative and uncertain and real. Outside, the wind picked up. Through the window, Lin Yu could see clouds gathering. Storm coming. Of course there was a storm coming. There was always a storm coming. But for the first time in 3 years, she wouldn't face it alone. They left the diner together. The boarding house was 3 blocks away, run by a widow named Mrs. Fletcher, who had opinions about everything and shared them whether asked or not. Mr. Turner, I presume. Mrs. Fletcher looked Elias up and down like she was inspecting livestock. I have your room ready. 2nd floor faces east. Clean sheets, clean towels. Breakfast at 7 sharp, supper at 6. No drinking, no smoking, no guests after 9. Her eyes flicked to Lin Yue on that last part. Understood, Elias said evenly. I'll show you up. But before Mrs. Fletcher could lead him away, Thomas Ridley appeared from around the corner. He must have been waiting. Well, well, the mysterious stranger arrives. Thomas smiled, but his eyes were cold. Thomas Ridley, welcome to Corazon, Mr. Turner. Elias Turner. Pleasure. Thomas didn't extend his hand. I see you've already met our local curiosity. Miss Lynn has quite the reputation around here. Does she? Elias's voice went flat. Oh yes. Independent woman, running that farm all alone. People have been wondering how long she could keep it up. Some of us have even offered to help, but she's too proud. Isn't that right, Lynn? Lin Yua felt the old anger rising. We've discussed this before, Thomas. I don't need your kind of help. Everyone needs help sometimes. Thomas's eyes moved between them. So what's your story, Turner? Mail order husband? That's a new low, even for you, Lynn. Elias stepped forward. Not aggressive, just present. He had 2 inches on Thomas and used them. My story is none of your concern, but since you asked so politely, I'm here to see if a woman who tells the truth is worth more than a town full of people who don't. Thomas's smile froze. Careful, stranger. You don't know how things work around here. I know exactly how things work. Small town, small minds, people who measure others by how much they match their own narrow view of acceptable. Elias's voice was quiet but hard. I've lived in towns like this before. The faces change, but the ugliness stays the same. You calling me ugly? I'm calling your behavior ugly. There's a difference. For a moment, Lin Yu thought Thomas might throw a punch. His face reddened, his fists clenched. But Mrs. Fletcher appeared in the doorway, and Sheriff Morrison was visible down the street, watching. Thomas stepped back. Enjoy your stay, Mr. Turner. I'm sure it'll be, educational. He walked away, but the threat hung in the air like smoke. Mrs. Fletcher sniffed. That man is trouble. Always has been. Now, Mr. Turner, about your room. One moment. Elias turned to Lin Yua. Tomorrow, could I see the farm? I'd like to know what we're... He stopped. I'd just like to see it. Tomorrow. Come at sunrise. I'll put you to work. Looking forward to it. Their eyes held for a beat too long. Mrs. Fletcher cleared her throat meaningfully. Lin Yu rode home as the storm rolled in. By the time she reached the farm, rain was falling in sheets that turned the world gray. She put her horse in the barn, fed the animals, and stood in the doorway watching the water pour off the broken roof. A man was coming tomorrow. A stranger who maybe wasn't so strange after all. A man who'd cried when he saw her, who'd defended her to Thomas Ridley, who'd held her hand in a diner while the whole town watched. Lin Yu went inside, lit the lamp, and looked around her small house with new eyes. It was a wreck. She'd cleaned obsessively for weeks, but cleaning couldn't hide the cracked walls, the drafty windows, the furniture held together with wire and hope. What would Elias think when he saw it? Then she caught herself. Since when did she care what anyone thought? But she did care. That was the problem. She cared what he thought, how he saw her, whether the reality of her life would send him running back to Billings. She cared, and that terrified her more than anything Thomas Ridley could do. Lin Yu didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed listening to the storm, to the drips where the roof leaked, to the old house settling and creaking around her. She thought about her mother, who'd slept in this room, who'd probably lain awake nights worrying too. She thought about her father, who'd believed so hard in something that never quite materialized. She thought about Daniel, who'd promised forever and delivered nothing. And she thought about Elias, asleep 3 miles away in a boarding house bed, snoring probably, dreaming nightmares about his dead wife. 2 broken people trying to build something from the wreckage. What were the odds it would work? Morning came cold and clear. Lin Yue fed the animals, collected 2 eggs from hens who'd finally started laying again, and was fixing the chicken coop door again when she heard the horse. Elias rode up on a rented mare looking stiff and uncomfortable in the saddle. Not much of a rider, he admitted, dismounting carefully. Mary and I mostly walked everywhere. I'll teach you. You offering lessons already? You'll need to ride if you're staying. The farm's too big to walk everywhere. If. The word hung between them. Elias looked around, taking in the sagging barn, the broken fences, the fields that hadn't been properly worked in 2 years. The house, small and weather-beaten, the whole place tired and struggling. It's worse than you described, he said finally. Lin Yua's stomach dropped. Of course. Of course, he'd take one look at the reality and, good thing I like a challenge. She stared at him. What? This is bad. I won't lie. But it's not hopeless. The barn needs a new roof and some structural work. The fences need replacing almost completely. The fields need tilling and probably fertilizer. The house... He stopped. When's the last time that roof was patched? 2 years ago. I tried last fall, but the tar wouldn't set properly. We'll need to do it before the real rain comes. Elias was already moving toward the barn, running his hand along the wall, testing boards. How's the foundation? Solid. My father built it right, even if he built it cheap. Your father built it smart. Good bones. Everything else we can fix. He turned to look at her. If you want to fix it. Linu felt something loosen in her chest. You're serious? Why wouldn't I be? This isn't some romantic farm from a story. This is hard work, endless work, and no guarantee any of it will pay off. I know that. I've failed at farming before, remember? Elias came back to where she stood. But I failed alone. Maybe together we won't fail. Maybe we will. Maybe. But at least we'll fail together. He said it so simply, like it was obvious, like partnership was the most natural thing in the world. Linu had forgotten that was possible. The chicken coop door keeps coming off the hinges, she said, changing the subject before she did something stupid like cry. I fixed it 3 times and it keeps breaking. Let me look. They spent the morning working. Elias examined the door, found the problem, rotted wood where the hinge attached, and carved out the rot with a knife. He found better wood in the barn, cut it to size, and reset the hinge properly. Should hold now, he said, but we'll need to replace the whole frame eventually. The rot's probably spreading. How do you know all this? Grew up on a farm. Left when I was 20, thought I was too good for it. Worked in town for years before I realized I'd made a mistake. Bought my own place. Learned everything the hard way. He smiled sadly. Mary used to joke that I learned by breaking things first. They moved to the barn. The roof was the biggest problem. Elias climbed up carefully, the ladder was questionable, and examined the damage. This needs to be done soon, he called down. Another big storm and the whole thing could collapse. You have animals in here? Just the cow and chickens at night. We need to move them somewhere safer until this is fixed. There is nowhere safer. Elias climbed down. He was sweating despite the cold, strands of hair stuck to his forehead. Then we fix it fast. I have enough saved to buy materials. If we work together, we could have it done in a week. I can't let you spend your money on my farm. Our farm. The words stopped her cold. Elias, I know it's fast. I know we barely know each other. But Linu, I didn't come here to visit. I came here to stay, if you'll have me. You've been here 1 day. I've been writing to you for 4 months. I know you better than I knew most people I grew up with. I know you're stubborn and proud and scared. I know you work yourself to exhaustion because you're terrified of being weak. I know you loved your parents, and they broke your heart by dying, and some bastard named Daniel broke it worse by leaving. He stepped closer. I know you're the strongest person I've ever met, and you're tired of being strong alone. Linu's throat closed up. You can't know all that from letters. I do know it, because I'm the same. Stubborn, proud, scared, tired. We're the same, you and me, just broken in slightly different ways. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of rain. There's another storm coming, Linu said. There's always another storm coming. If you stay, if we do this, it won't be easy. I don't want easy. The town will make it hell. Let them try. I will never be a proper wife. I'll never be soft or sweet or... Elias kissed her. Not aggressive, not demanding, gentle. Asking a question with his lips against hers. Linu had been kissed before. Daniel had kissed her, promised her everything with those kisses, then disappeared like smoke. This was different. This kiss tasted like honesty. When Elias pulled back, his eyes were bright again. I don't want proper. I want you, exactly as you are. Linu couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The walls she'd built so carefully, so high, were crumbling, and she didn't know how to stop it. Didn't know if she wanted to stop it. I'm scared, she whispered. Me too. What if we fail? Then we fail. But we'll fail trying, which is better than succeeding at being alone. The first drops of rain hit, fat, cold drops that promised a deluge. "Come inside," Linu said, "before we both get soaked." They ran for the house as the sky opened up. Inside, dripping and breathless, they stood in her small kitchen and looked at each other. "I need to get back to town before dark," Elias said. "Mrs. Fletcher has rules. Come back tomorrow. I'll come back every day this week if you want." "I want." He smiled. That same uncertain smile from the train platform. "Lin Yue, by the end of this week, I'm going to ask you to marry me. I'm telling you now so you can prepare your answer." Her heart stopped. "Elias, I know it's fast, but I'm 34 years old and I've wasted enough time being careful. Life's too short and too hard to waste time pretending we don't know what we want." He touched her face, gentle. "I want this. I want you. I want to fix this farm and build a life and stop being alone. But only if you want the same thing." Lin Yue closed her eyes, felt his hand on her face, felt the rain pounding on the roof, felt something inside her that had been frozen for years begin, finally, to thaw. "Ask me at the end of the week," she said. "We'll see what my answer is." Elias rode back to town through the storm. Lin Yue watched from the window until he disappeared, then sank into her mother's chair and put her head in her hands. What was she doing? She was letting someone in, after swearing she never would, after building walls specifically to prevent this. She was taking the biggest risk of her life. And terrifying as it was, somewhere beneath the fear, she felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years. She felt alive. The week passed in a blur of work and words and moments that felt stolen from a life Lin Yue had convinced herself she'd never have. Elias came every morning at sunrise. They worked side by side, replacing fence posts, clearing debris from the barn, preparing the fields for spring planting. He didn't talk much while he worked, just steady, focused effort that reminded Lin Yue of her father. But during breaks, over water and stale bread, they talked about everything. He told her about the farm he'd lost, about lying awake nights listening to Mary's breathing get shallower, about the moment he'd known she wouldn't survive and the worst moment when he'd been right. He told her about selling everything, about the shame of walking away from land he'd sworn to keep, about the years since spent drifting and trying to remember who he'd been before grief hollowed him out. Lin Yue told him about watching her father work himself to death trying to prove he belonged, about her mother's quiet dignity that never quite masked the exhaustion, about the garden her mother had planted and replanted every spring even as the town made it clear they'd never be welcome. She told him about Daniel, really told him, not the sanitized version from her letters, about the plans they'd made, the future she'd imagined, and the gut punch of seeing him with someone else like she'd never existed at all. "I wanted to hurt him," she admitted on the third day, sitting on the porch steps while rain hammered the roof. "Not just hurt his feelings, actually hurt him. I had my father's rifle and I thought about it." "Did you?" "No, because that would have proved them right. That I was dangerous, that Chinese people were violent, that we didn't belong." She pulled her knees to her chest. "So instead I buried it, all that anger, just shoved it down and kept going. That's worse than shooting him." "What?" "Burying it. That kind of anger doesn't disappear. It just rots inside you." Elias looked at his hands, scarred and calloused. "After Mary died, I was angry at everyone. At her for leaving, at myself for not saving her, at people who tried to help because their help felt like pity. I almost drank myself to death that first year." "What stopped you?" "Ran out of money." He laughed, bitter. "Couldn't even afford to kill myself properly. Had to sober up and figure out how to survive. And once I was sober, I realized the anger wasn't helping. It was just making everything worse." "So you just stopped being angry?" "No, I'm still angry. I'm angry Mary died. I'm angry the world is cruel. I'm angry that good people suffer while bastards thrive." He looked at Lin Yue. "But I decided to use it for something instead of letting it use me." "Like what?" "Like fixing this barn roof before it kills your cow." They worked in the rain that afternoon, Elias up on the ladder with tar and patches, Lin Yue holding the ladder steady and passing him materials. Water soaked them both to the skin. Elias slipped twice, catching himself at the last second. By the time they finished, they were shivering and exhausted. "Inside," Lin Yue ordered, "before you freeze to death." She built up the fire while Elias stood dripping on her floor, looking uncomfortable. "I should get back to town." You'll catch pneumonia riding in this. Stay until it lets up. Linu, I'm in your house, alone, soaking wet. People talk. People already talk. At least this way you won't die on the road, and give them something real to gossip about. She found dry clothes, her father's old work shirt and pants. They were too short on Elias, but better than nothing. He changed in her bedroom while she changed in the kitchen, both of them carefully not acknowledging the intimacy of the moment. When he emerged, hair damp and curling, wearing dead man's clothes, Lin Yue felt something shift in her chest. This was what it would be like. Him in her space, in her life, wearing her father's clothes and fixing her mother's garden and becoming part of the fabric of everything she'd thought she'd face alone. Thank you, Elias said quietly. For what? Letting me stay. I know it's not easy for you, letting anyone in. Lin Yue busied herself with making tea. You're making assumptions. Am I? She didn't answer. The tea steeped in silence, broken only by rain and crackling fire. My father used to sit in that chair, Lin Yue said finally, nodding toward the worn armchair near the hearth. Every night after dinner, he'd smoke his pipe and read the newspaper, even though half the news made him angry. My mother would sew, and I'd do schoolwork at the table. It was... She stopped. It was normal. For a little while, we were just a family, not outsiders, not Chinese people trying to prove something. Just us. Elias sat in the chair carefully, like he was afraid it might break. What happened to normal? My father had a stroke. Mild one, the doctor said, but it slowed him down. He couldn't work the way he used to. That's when Daniel showed up, looking for work. Railroad had laid him off, and he needed somewhere to stay until he figured out his next move. Lin Yue handed Elias his tea. He was charming, said all the right things, helped my father with the heavy work, made my mother laugh, made me believe that he'd stay, that I wasn't alone. She sat across from him, cradling her own cup. My father got worse, needed more help. Daniel started staying out late, disappearing for days. I thought he was finding work, trying to make money for us. Turned out he was courting the banker's daughter. Better prospects, he told his friends. Why settle for a Chinese farm girl when he could marry into money? I'm sorry, don't be. I learned something valuable. That love is just another word for need, and need makes you weak. That's not true, isn't it? My mother loved my father, and it killed her watching him fade. My father loved this land, and it broke him trying to make it work. I loved Daniel, and he left me with nothing but, you loved them because they were worth loving, Elias interrupted, and them leaving, them dying. That wasn't because love made you weak. That was just life being cruel. What's the difference? The difference is what you do after. You didn't give up. You didn't leave. You stayed and fought and survived. That's not weakness. Lin Yue set down her tea. Her hands were shaking slightly. Stop. Stop what? Making me feel things. Making me hope. I don't want to hope. Why not? Because hope hurts worse than anything when it gets taken away. Elias leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Lin Yue, I can't promise I'll never hurt you. I can't promise I won't die or leave or fail. But I can promise I won't lie to you. I won't pretend to be something I'm not. And I won't leave because things get hard. You don't know that. You can't know that. I do know that. Because I've already lived through the worst thing that could happen to me. My wife died in my arms, and I wanted to die with her. But I didn't. I survived. And if I can survive that, I can survive anything. He reached for her hand. She let him take it. We can survive anything. The rain pounded harder. Wind rattled the windows. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled. Ask me, Lin Yue whispered. What? You said you'd ask me at the end of the week. Ask me now. Elias's eyes widened. Lin Yue, ask me before I lose my nerve. He stood, still holding her hand, and pulled her up to face him. It's only been 5 days. I don't care. We barely know each other. I know enough. The town will lose their minds. Let them. Elias laughed, surprised and genuine. Then his face went serious. Lin Yue, will you marry me? Will you let me stay here and work beside you and fix this farm and build something real? Will you trust me enough to try? She should say no. Every instinct screamed at her to protect herself, to push him away, to maintain the walls that had kept her safe, if not happy. But she was tired of safe, tired of walls, tired of being alone. Yes, The word came out steady. Sure. Like she'd been waiting years to say it. Elias pulled her close, and Lin Yue let herself be held. His heart beat against her ear, steady and real. This wasn't the fantasy she'd imagined with Daniel. This was better because it was honest. They stood like that while the storm raged, two people who'd lost everything finding something in each other worth fighting for. When the rain finally eased, Elias rode back to town. Lin Yue watched him go, then walked through her house seeing it differently now. Not empty. Not anymore. Soon it would have another heartbeat, another voice, another person to fill the silence. She touched her mother's embroidered cushion, her father's chair, the table where they'd eaten dinner as a family. "I'm trying," she said to the empty room. "I'm trying to live instead of just survive." The walls didn't answer, but the house felt warmer somehow. The next morning, Elias arrived with news. "I talked to Mrs. Fletcher last night, told her we're getting married." "How did she take it?" "About as well as you'd expect. Said I was making a mistake, that you're trouble, that the town would never accept a Chinese wife." He grinned. "Then she gave me the name of a minister who'd perform the ceremony without asking too many questions. That was generous of her. I think she just wants me out of her boarding house. Apparently I do snore." They spent the day working on the chicken coop, replacing the entire frame like Elias had suggested. It was tedious work, but they fell into an easy rhythm. Lin Yue cutting boards to size, Elias fitting them together, both of them stopping occasionally to argue about the best approach. "You're doing it wrong," Lin Yue said, watching him try to fit a corner joint. "There's no wrong way to do this. There's your way and the right way. They're the same thing." "They're really not." Elias stepped back and gestured at the frame. "Fine, show me." Lin Yue demonstrated the technique her father had taught her, fitting the joint snugly without forcing it. Elias watched, then tried it himself. It worked. "Huh," he said. "What?" "You're right. I usually am." I'm going to remember this moment. The one time Lin Yue admitted she's usually right instead of always right. She threw a wood scrap at him. He ducked, laughing. This was what it could be like, Lin Yue realized. Not perfect, not easy, but real. Arguments and laughter and work done together. Partnership instead of loneliness. The chicken coop finished, they moved to the house. The roof needed patching before the next big rain. Elias climbed up with supplies while Lin Yue spotted him from below, ready to catch him if he fell. He didn't fall, but the wind picked up, stronger than expected, and a gust nearly knocked him off balance. Lin Yu's heart stopped watching him grab for the roof peak, tools sliding toward the edge. "Careful! I'm fine!" "You're not fine. You're about to break your neck. I said I'm—" Another gust hit. Elias grabbed the chimney, held on. "Okay, maybe not fine." "Come down! I'm almost done. Elias Turner, if you fall off my roof and die before we're married, I'll kill you myself." He laughed at that, and the sound carried on the wind. But he finished quickly and climbed down carefully, and when his feet hit solid ground, Lin Yue grabbed him hard. "Don't do that again." "Do what?" "Scare me like that." His arms came around her. "I'm okay, see? Still breathing." "You better keep breathing. I didn't say yes just to become a widow before I'm even a wife." They stood like that, holding each other in the yard while the wind tried to tear them apart. Lin Yue felt his heart beat, fast from exertion and fear, felt her own heart matching it. This was what caring felt like. The fear of loss, the relief of safety, the desperate need for someone to stay. She'd forgotten. Or maybe she'd never really known. That night, as Elias prepared to leave, he paused at his horse. "The minister can do it Saturday. That gives us 3 days to prepare." "Prepare what? We don't have money for a wedding." "We don't need money. Just need 2 people willing to make promises and keep them." He mounted the horse carefully, still awkward, still learning. "Unless you want something bigger? I can try to—" "No, small is good. Small is honest." "Saturday, then?" "Saturday." He rode off into the dusk, and Lin Yue went inside to face the reality of what she'd agreed to. In 3 days, she'd be married. In 3 days, everything would change. She should be terrified. She was terrified, but beneath the terror, something else grew, something fragile and new that might have been hope. Friday came with wind that screamed like it was dying. Lin Yue woke to the sound of something banging against the house and found a shutter torn loose, slamming against the siding. She secured it with rope and went to check the animals. The chickens were agitated, the cow lowing nervously. Lin Yue fed them and spoke softly, trying to calm them. The sky had turned a sickly green-gray color that made her stomach clench. Storm coming, a bad one. Elias arrived mid-morning, took one look at the sky, and started securing everything that could fly away. They worked fast, moving tools into the barn, reinforcing the chicken coop, closing shutters. The wind kept building, colder now, carrying the smell of rain and something else. Something electric. "We need to get the animals inside the house," Elias said. "What?" "The barn won't hold if this gets bad, as I think it will. We need them inside." "Inside my house? You want to lose them?" He was right. Lin Yue hated that he was right, but the barn was barely standing even on calm days. In a real storm, it would come apart. They herded the chickens into crates and carried them into the kitchen. The cow took longer, suspicious and stubborn. By the time they got her through the door, knocking over a chair and nearly destroying the table in the process, the first drops were falling. Not rain, ice. "Get inside," Lin Yue yelled over the wind. "Now!" They barely made it before the storm hit in earnest. Ice pounded the roof like bullets. Wind screamed through every crack, making the whole house shudder. Lin Yue and Elias stood in the kitchen with a cow, 6 chickens, and growing dread. "This is bad," Elias said. "I know." "The barn." "I know." A crash outside. Something big giving way. Through the window, Lin Yue saw the barn roof cave in on one side, crushed under the weight of ice and wind. "The harvest," she breathed. "Everything I stored for winter, it's in the barn." She moved toward the door. Elias grabbed her arm. "You can't go out there." "I have to. That's everything. Without it, we won't make it through. You won't make it through the next 5 minutes in this storm. Let go of me." "No." He pulled her back. "Lin Yue, it's not worth your life. It's everything I have. You have me now." The words hung between them, loud in the screaming wind. Lin Yue stared at him. At this man she'd known for less than a week, who was supposed to marry her tomorrow, who just claimed she had him like that meant something. "I have to try," she said quietly. Elias's jaw tightened. "Then we try together." "No. We try together, or we don't try at all." The barn was 50 yards away. In this storm, it might as well have been 50 miles. But Lin Yue nodded, and they wrapped themselves in every coat they could find, tied rope around their waists, linking them together, and stepped into hell. The wind hit like a fist. Ice stung exposed skin, driven horizontal by gusts that nearly knocked them both down. Lin Yue couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. She held tight to the rope, felt Elias behind her, and pushed forward. The barn loomed out of the storm, half collapsed and groaning. The door hung crooked on broken hinges. Inside, water poured through the destroyed roof, and ice coated everything. The harvest stores were in the back corner, sacks of grain, barrels of preserved vegetables, everything Lin Yue had managed to save from 2 years of failed crops. It was already wet, some sacks split open, grain spilling across the muddy floor. "Grab what you can," Elias shouted. They worked frantically, hauling sacks toward the door. Lin Yu's hands went numb within minutes. Her face felt frozen. But she kept moving, kept lifting, kept fighting. Elias tripped over debris and went down hard. Lin Yue heard him grunt in pain, but he got up, blood streaming from his forehead where he'd hit something sharp. "You're hurt." "I'm fine. Keep moving." Another crash. A support beam gave way, and part of the remaining roof collapsed inward. They were out of time. "Go!" Elias grabbed the last sack, hoisted it onto his shoulder despite the blood running into his eyes, and shoved Lin Yue toward the door. They ran, stumbled really, through the storm. The rope between them snapped taut as Elias fell again, and Lin Yue nearly went down with him. She hauled him up, took part of the weight of the sack, and they dragged themselves and the grain back toward the house. By the time they made it inside, they were both bleeding, frozen, and shaking so hard they could barely stand. Lin Yue slammed the door shut, and they collapsed on the floor, the rescued sacks piled around them, water and blood pooling beneath. The cow looked at them reproachfully from the corner. "Your forehead," Lin Yue managed through chattering teeth. "Your hands," Elias countered. She looked down. Her palms were torn open, bleeding where the rough sacks had shredded the skin. She hadn't even felt it. We need to get warm, she said. They peeled off the wet layers with numb fingers. Linu built up the fire while Elias sat at the table, blood still running from the gash above his eyebrow. It wasn't deep, but it wouldn't stop bleeding. Let me see. Linu fetched her mother's old sewing kit with hands that still shook. This is going to hurt. Everything already hurts. She cleaned the wound with whiskey, waste of good alcohol, but necessary, and Elias hissed through his teeth. Sorry. Don't be. Just do what you need to do. Linu threaded the needle. She'd stitched torn clothes, mended blankets, but never human skin. Her hands shook worse now than they had in the storm. I don't know if I can do this. Elias took her damaged hands in his, careful of the torn skin. Yes, you can. You can do anything. What if I hurt you? Then you hurt me. But I trust you. That word again. Trust. Linu took a breath and started stitching. Elias didn't flinch, didn't make a sound, just sat still and let her work. The stitches were clumsy, uneven, but they held. When she finished, she tied off the thread and sat back. There. You'll have a scar. Good. I'll remember today every time I see it. Today when you almost died saving my grain. Today when we almost died together. He caught her hand again, the one not holding the needle. That's what marriage is going to be like, isn't it? Both of us too stubborn to let the other face things alone, even when it's stupid dangerous. Linu laughed, surprising herself. Probably. Good. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, they sat together in the kitchen with a cow and chickens and grain they'd nearly died for, and Linu realized something. She wasn't afraid anymore. Not of the storm, not of tomorrow, not of the risk she was taking. She was terrified, yes, but it was a different kind of terror. The kind that came from having something worth losing. We should clean your hands, Elias said. She let him wash the blood away, bandage her palms with strips of clean cloth. His touch was gentle despite his own injuries. When he finished, he didn't let go. Linu? Yes? Thank you for saying yes. For taking a chance on someone you barely know. For being brave enough to try. I'm not brave. You're the bravest person I've ever met. She looked at him, blood-stained, exhausted, wearing a dead man's clothes and sporting stitches she'd put in with shaking hands. He looked terrible. He looked real. Kiss me, she said. He did. Slower this time, deeper, like they had all the time in the world instead of a storm trying to tear them apart. Linu tasted blood and ice and something that might have been hope. When they pulled apart, Elias rested his forehead against hers, careful of the stitches. Tomorrow, he said, tomorrow. We'll get married, and then we'll fix this farm, and then we'll survive whatever comes next. In that order? In exactly that order. The storm lasted through the night. They took turns feeding the fire, dozing in chairs, checking on the animals that had invaded their home. At some point, exhaustion won and they both fell asleep. Elias in her father's chair, Linu on the floor wrapped in blankets, close enough that she could reach out and touch him if she wanted to. She did want to. So she did. Morning came gray and cold but calm. The storm had passed. Linu awoke to find Elias already up, looking out the window at the damage. How bad? She asked. Barn's a total loss. Fences are down, trees down everywhere. He turned to her. But the house is still standing. We're still standing. It's our wedding day. It is. We look terrible. We really do. I don't have a dress. I don't have a suit. The minister is probably not even going to show up in this weather. Probably not. They looked at each other across the wreckage of the kitchen, the cows still in the corner, chickens roosting on furniture, mud and blood and grain scattered everywhere. We should probably postpone, Linu said. Probably. Get cleaned up, wait for better weather, do it properly. That would be the sensible thing. Neither of them moved. Then Elias smiled. Or we could do it anyway. Right now, just us. Without a minister? We don't need a minister. We just need promises and the will to keep them. Linu's heart beat faster. That's not legal. We'll make it legal later, but the promises, those can be real right now. He held out his hand, stitched forehead, torn clothes, exhausted and battered from the storm. real in every possible way. Lin Yue took his hand. They stood in the middle of her wrecked kitchen, holding each other's damaged hands, and made promises that no one but them would ever hear. Elias went first. I promise to stay, to work beside you, to tell you the truth even when it's hard, to fight for this farm and this life and you, always you. Until I can't anymore. Lin Yu's throat tightened. I promise to try, to let you in even when I'm scared, to trust you with the parts of me I've kept hidden, to build something real instead of just surviving. She paused. And to never give up on us, even when it gets hard, especially when it gets hard. Is that a yes? That's a yes. He kissed her then, and it felt like coming home. Outside, the world was broken and frozen and hard. But inside, in that small house with its impossible residents, something new was being built from the wreckage. Two people who'd lost everything, finding everything they needed in each other. They spent the rest of Saturday cleaning up the storm's damage and pretending the cow wasn't still in the kitchen. By Sunday, they couldn't pretend anymore. She has to go back outside, Lin Yu said, staring at the animal who'd made herself comfortable in what used to be the sitting area. The barn's collapsed. Then we build something temporary. I can't live with a cow in my house. Our house, Elias corrected, and Lin Yu's chest did something strange at the word. They spent the morning constructing a makeshift shelter from salvaged barnwood, working in silence broken only by the sound of hammering and the occasional curse when a board didn't fit right. The cow watched them work with what Lin Yue swore was judgment in her eyes. When they finally coaxed her outside, Lin Yue stood in the middle of her kitchen and looked at the damage. Mud everywhere. Furniture scratched and broken. The smell would take weeks to air out. It's a disaster, she said. It's fixable. Elias was already moving the table back to its proper place. Everything's fixable. You keep saying that. Because it's true. They worked through the day, scrubbing floors, righting furniture, trying to restore some semblance of order. As the sun set, Elias paused in the middle of sweeping and looked at Lin Yue. We should probably tell people about being married. Lin Yue's stomach clenched. You mean tell the town? Unless you want to keep it secret. Can we keep it secret? You want to? She thought about it. About the looks, the whispers, the outright hostility that would come when people found out. About Thomas Ridley's reaction. About Mrs. Patterson's scandalized clutching of pearls. About Sheriff Morrison's smug certainty that this would fail. No, she said finally. No more hiding. Monday morning, they rode into Corazon together. Lin Yue on her old mare, Elias on the rented horse he still couldn't ride properly. They went straight to the courthouse where a board clerk took their information without comment and issued a marriage license. You'll need a minister to perform the ceremony, the clerk said, not looking up. We'll handle that, Elias replied. Outside, Lin Yu looked at the paper in her hands. Official now. Legal. Real in a way that yesterday's promises hadn't been. Should we find that minister Mrs. Fletcher mentioned? Elias asked. No. No? We already made our promises. This is, she held up the license, is just paperwork. They stopped at the general store for supplies. Mrs. Patterson took one look at them walking in together, and her face went through several complicated expressions before settling on disapproving concern. Miss Lin, Mr. Turner, I heard about the storm damage. Terrible business. We managed, Lin Yue said, setting her list on the counter. I'm sure you did, with Mr. Turner's help, of course. Such a good neighbor, helping out like that. Mrs. Patterson's eyes gleamed. Though people have been talking about how much time he's been spending at your farm, a young woman alone with a man, unmarried, it creates such unfortunate impressions. We're married, Elias said calmly. Mrs. Patterson dropped the jar she was holding. It shattered on the floor, glass and pickled vegetables spreading across the boards. Excuse me? We got married, Saturday, during the storm. He put his arm around Lin Yu's shoulders. So any impressions people want to create, they can create about my wife. The word hung in the air like a declaration of war. Mrs. Patterson's mouth opened and closed several times. Saturday? But there was no ceremony. No one saw. The minister didn't. We took care of it ourselves, Lin Yu said. And this morning we made it legal. So if you'd like to fill this order for us, we'd appreciate it. She pushed the list forward. Mrs. Patterson stared at it like it was written in a foreign language. This is highly irregular. People will want to know. The town can expect whatever it wants, Elias said, his voice still pleasant but with steel underneath. We're married. That's all that matters. They left with their supplies and Mrs. Patterson frantically wiping up pickles, no doubt preparing to spread the news to everyone she could corner. At the feed store, Mr. Henderson's reaction was less shocked, more calculating. Married, eh? That was fast. When you know, Elias said. Sure. And I suppose now you'll be taking over the Lin farm, making all the decisions, running things proper. Linu stepped forward. The farm is mine. My name is on the deed. Nothing about that has changed. So what, Turner here is just living off your land? That's an interesting arrangement. The arrangement is between us, Linu said flatly, and none of your business. Everything in this town is my business, sweetheart. Don't call her that, Elias said quietly. The temperature in the store dropped 10 degrees. Mr. Henderson straightened, puffing up like he was preparing for a fight. But Elias didn't move, didn't raise his voice, just stood there looking at Henderson with eyes that had seen too much to be impressed by small-town posturing. We need 50 pounds of feed and 20 feet of rope, Elias said. Can you provide that, or should we ride to the next town? Henderson glared but fulfilled the order. They paid and left, and Linu realized her hands were shaking. You all right? Elias asked once they were outside. I'm fine. You're shaking. I'm angry. At me? At them. At everyone in this town who's decided we're their entertainment. She turned to face him. This is going to get worse before it gets better. I know. They're going to say terrible things about me, about you, about us. I know that too. And you're still staying. Elias took her face in his hands, right there on Main Street, where anyone could see. Linu, I didn't marry you because I thought it would be easy. I married you because easy is worthless and you're worth everything. She kissed him then, in front of the feed store, in front of Mrs. Patterson, who'd come out to gawk, in front of the whole damn town. Let them talk. They rode home in silence, but it was a different kind of silence. Comfortable. Shared. The silence of two people who didn't need words to understand each other. At the farm, they worked until dark. The barn was beyond saving. They'd need to tear down what remained and rebuild from scratch. But the fences could be repaired, the fields prepared for planting, the house slowly put back to rights. That night, as they sat at the kitchen table eating thin soup and hard bread, Elias said, We need to talk about sleeping arrangements. Linu's spoon stopped halfway to her mouth. What about them? Well, we're married now, legally and otherwise. But I've been sleeping on the floor in the front room, and you've been sleeping in the bedroom, and that's fine if that's what you want. But eventually people are going to notice, and they'll say, I don't care what they say. Neither do I. But I care what you're comfortable with. Linu set down her spoon. They'd kissed, made promises, called each other husband and wife. But this was different. This was the reality of sharing a life, sharing space, sharing a bed. I haven't shared a bed with anyone since my mother died, she said quietly. She got sick at the end, needed someone nearby. I slept next to her those last weeks, listening to her breathe, terrified every night that she'd stop. We don't have to. I want to. The words surprised her as much as they seemed to surprise him. I don't know how to not be alone anymore. Elias reached across the table. We'll figure it out together, like everything else. That night, Linu lay in her bed, their bed now, listening to Elias breathe beside her. He'd been right about the snoring. It was terrible, but it was also real and alive and proof she wasn't alone anymore. She didn't sleep much. Neither did he. They just lay there in the dark, carefully not touching, both terrified and hopeful in equal measure. This is awkward, Elias whispered. Very. Tomorrow will be easier. Probably not. He laughed softly. Probably not. But he was wrong. Tomorrow was easier, and the day after that. Not easy, but easier. They fell into rhythms, Elias waking first to start the fire, Linu making breakfast while he fed the animals, working together during the day, eating together in the evening, sleeping in the same bed at night. The touching came gradually, a hand on her shoulder, her fingers brushing his arm, small intimacies that built into something bigger. Until one night, 3 weeks after their wedding, Elias pulled her close and she let him. Let herself be held. Let herself feel safe. "I love you," he whispered against her hair. Linu froze. "Don't." "Why not?" "Because love ruins everything." "That's not true." "It is. Everyone I've loved has left me. I'm not leaving." "You don't know that." Elias pulled back enough to look at her. "Linu, I'm going to say it anyway, and you can hate me for it if you want. I love you. I love your stubbornness and your strength and the way you pretend you don't need anyone while secretly desperate to be needed. I love that you're terrible at accepting help and worse at asking for it. I love that you married me in a kitchen full of chickens because you were too proud to wait for better circumstances." "Stop." "I love you," he said again, "and I'm going to keep loving you whether you love me back or not." Linu's eyes burned. "That's not fair." "Nothing about this is fair, but it's real." She kissed him to shut him up, and the kiss turned into more. And for the first time since Daniel left, Linu let herself trust someone with more than just words. Spring came slowly, fighting winter every inch of the way. But it came. They tore down the remains of the barn and started building a new one. Elias taught Linu the structural tricks his father had taught him. Linu taught Elias which plants would survive Montana's brutal climate and which were just pretty fantasies. They planted the fields together, Elias behind the plow, Linu dropping seeds. It was backbreaking work that left them both exhausted, but the exhaustion felt good, productive, like they were building something instead of just surviving. The town watched. Linu felt their eyes everywhere. At the feed store, the general store, even riding past farms on the way to town. People whispered. Some were just curious. Others were actively hostile. Thomas Ridley was the worst. He made a point of showing up at the farm one afternoon, ostensibly to see if they needed help. "Heard you two got hitched," he said, leaning against his horse like he owned the place. "That's real romantic, Turner. Marrying the China girl nobody else wanted." Elias straightened from the fence post he was setting. "You need to leave." "I'm just being neighborly." "No, you're being an ass. There's a difference." Thomas's smile faded. "Careful, Turner. You're new here. You don't know how things work." "I know exactly how things work. Small men trying to feel big by making others feel small. I've seen it before." Elias stepped forward. "But here's what you need to know about me. I don't scare easy, I don't back down, and I don't let anyone threaten my wife." "I'm not threatening—" "You are. You've been threatening her for months, but she's not alone anymore." Elias's voice dropped. "And I promise you, if you ever come onto this property again without an invitation, you'll regret it." Thomas looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Elias's face must have convinced him otherwise. He mounted his horse and left, but the look he gave them promised this wasn't over. Linu had watched the whole exchange from the porch. When Thomas disappeared, she walked over to where Elias stood. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did. I can handle Thomas Ridley myself." "I know you can, but you don't have to anymore." He turned to face her. "That's what marriage means. We handle things together." "Even the ugly things?" "Especially the ugly things." She kissed him then, there in the muddy yard with half-set fence posts around them and work still to do. Because he was right. She didn't have to face everything alone anymore. The barn took 6 weeks to build. They couldn't afford to hire help, so they did everything themselves. Elias did most of the heavy lifting, but Linu worked beside him, hauling boards, holding beams steady, hammering until her arms ached. The day they raised the roof, half the town came to watch. Not to help, to watch. Waiting for them to fail, for the structure to collapse, for proof that a Chinese woman and her desperate husband couldn't make it work. But the barn didn't fall, the roof held. And when they finished, sweating and exhausted and triumphant, Linu looked at the people watching and lifted her chin. "Show's over," she called out. "Unless someone wants to actually help instead of just gawk." No one did. They dispersed, disappointed there was no disaster to gossip about. That night, Linu and Elias sat on the porch steps and looked at what they'd built. A barn. Not fancy, not perfect, but solid. Real. Theirs. "We did it," Lin Yue said. We did. Think it'll stand? It'll stand. We built it right. She leaned against him, tired in a way that felt good. What's next? Next we plant the garden, your mother's garden. Lin Yu had been avoiding that corner of the property since her mother died. The small plot where her mother had coaxed flowers and vegetables from stubborn soil, where she'd spent hours on her knees fighting weeds and frost, and her own exhaustion to make something beautiful. I don't know if I can. Why not? Because it was hers. And every time I look at it, I remember her hands in the dirt, her voice singing while she worked. I remember how hard she tried to make this place feel like home, even though it never really did. Lin Yu's throat tightened. If I plant it and it dies, it feels like she dies all over again. Elias was quiet for a moment. Then he said, What if we plant it and it lives? What? What if we plant it and we care for it and it grows? What if instead of letting it die with her, we keep it alive because of her? Lin Yu looked at the dark corner of the yard where weeds had taken over her mother's careful work. I wouldn't know where to start. Yes, you would. She taught you. You just have to remember. They started the next morning, clearing the weeds first, then turning the soil. Lin Yue worked slowly, carefully, trying to remember everything her mother had taught her. Where the sun hit longest, which plants needed more water, how to space the seeds so they wouldn't choke each other. Elias worked beside her, following her directions, asking questions when he didn't understand. He didn't try to take over or tell her what to do. He just worked. By the end of the day, the garden was planted. Vegetables on one side, flowers on the other. Not as elaborate as her mother's had been, but it was a start. She would have liked this, Lin Yue said, standing back to survey their work. Tell me about her. So she did. Told him about her mother's laugh, her quiet strength, the way she'd maintained dignity even when people treated her like she was invisible. Told him about the songs she used to sing, the stories she told about China, the way she'd tried to give Lin Yue the best of both worlds and ended up caught between them herself. She sounds remarkable, Elias said when Lin Yue finished. She was. And this place killed her. No. This place tried to kill her, but she fought it every day she was here. That garden proves it. She refused to let them take everything from her. Lin Yue looked at the freshly turned earth, at the possibility buried in the soil, and felt something shift inside her. Her mother hadn't given up. She'd fought until she couldn't fight anymore. And now Lin Yu was fighting the same battle. But this time, she wasn't alone. Summer arrived with heat that baked the ground hard. They watered the crops daily, watching for signs of growth, praying for rain that didn't come. The town watched too, waiting for failure, waiting to say we told you so. But the crops grew. Slowly, stubbornly, but they grew. And the garden, her mother's garden, exploded with life. Tomatoes, beans, squash, and flowers. So many flowers. Her mother's favorites. Chrysanthemums and peonies and wild roses that shouldn't have survived Montana's harsh climate, but did anyway. Lin Yue stood in the garden one morning, surrounded by blooms, and cried. Not from sadness, from something else. Something that might have been peace. Elias found her there. You okay? She would have loved this. I think she does love this. Wherever she is, she sees what you've done. What we've done. You think so? I know so. The harvest came in better than expected. Not abundant, but enough. Enough to sell, to save, to survive another winter. They loaded the wagon and took it to town together, and this time when people stared, Lin Yu stared back. Let them look. Let them judge. She had a farm that was thriving, a garden in full bloom, and a husband who'd kept every promise he'd made. She had everything she needed. At the general store, Mrs. Patterson couldn't hide her surprise at the quality of their vegetables. My goodness, these are lovely. Thank you, Lin Yue said. I suppose having a man around has helped quite a bit. Having a partner has helped quite a bit, Lin Yue corrected. We work together. Still, it must be nice not having to carry all the burden yourself. It is nice, Lin Yue agreed, but not because I couldn't carry it. Because choosing to share it is better than being forced to carry it alone. Mrs. Patterson blinked, clearly not sure how to respond to that. They sold their produce, bought what supplies they needed, and rode home as the sun set. The farm stretched before them, their barn, their fields, their home. Still rough, still hard, but theirs. Think we'll make it? Linu asked. We're making it now. I mean long term. Think we'll actually succeed? Elias considered. I think success looks different than what I used to imagine. I used to think it meant being comfortable, having enough money, not worrying. But that's not real. Real success is working beside someone who matters, building something that lasts, going to sleep tired but satisfied. That's a low bar. Is it? Most people never get even that. He was right. Linu had spent years surviving alone, defining success as simply making it to the next day. But now success meant something more. It meant partnership, growth, life instead of mere existence. That night, lying in bed next to Elias, Linu said the word she'd been holding back for months. I love you. Elias went very still. What? You heard me. I love you. I fought it. I tried not to, but I do. I love you. He pulled her close. Say it again. I love you, Elias Turner. One more time. I love you. He kissed her like she was the most precious thing in the world. And maybe she was. To him, she was. Fall arrived with its usual warning that winter was coming. They harvested the last of the crops, put up food for the cold months, prepared the barn and house for snow. It was hard work, but familiar now. Comfortable. The garden they left standing. Linu wanted to see if anything would survive winter, if her mother's flowers were as stubborn as her mother had been. She suspected they were. One afternoon, Sheriff Morrison rode out to the farm. Linu saw him coming and braced for trouble, but he dismounted with his hands visible, making it clear this wasn't a hostile visit. Mrs. Turner, he said, tipping his hat. It was the first time anyone in authority had called her that. Sheriff, I wanted to let you know Thomas Ridley's leaving town, heading to California, supposedly. Better opportunities. Why are you telling me this? Morrison shifted uncomfortably. Because he left talking, making threats about how he'd been run off by Chinese trash and cowards who protected them. I wanted to make sure you knew, in case he came back. He won't come back, Elias said, stepping out of the barn. Men like that only fight when they think they'll win. He knows he won't win here. Morrison nodded. Still, be careful. Both of you. He left, and Linu looked at Elias. That was almost respectful. Progress. Slow, but progress. Winter came hard and stayed long, but they were prepared this time. Plenty of food, plenty of wood, plenty of work to keep them busy. And at night, they had each other. Stories and warmth and the slow building of something that might last. On their first anniversary, counted from their kitchen wedding, not the legal paperwork, they stood in the garden under falling snow. Nothing was blooming, but the plants were there, dormant but alive, waiting for spring. We made it, Linu said. We did. Think we'll make another year? I think we'll make 50 years, 60 if we're stubborn enough. We're definitely stubborn enough. Elias pulled her close. I have something for you. He handed her a small wooden box he'd carved himself. Inside was a jade bracelet, simple but beautiful. I sold some of the harvest separately, saved the money. I know you sold your mother's bracelet to pay the debts, and I can't replace that. But I wanted you to have something, a reminder that we're building new traditions, new treasures, things that are ours. Linu slipped it on, tears freezing on her cheeks. It's perfect. You're perfect. I'm really not. Perfect for me, then. They stood in the snow, in the garden that refused to die, on the farm they'd saved together, and Linu realized something. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living, really, truly living. And the day she'd chosen to trust a stranger had been the day she'd finally chosen to live. Spring returned with a vengeance, melting snow into rivers of mud that made every step a battle. But when the ground finally dried enough to work, Linu walked to her mother's garden and found green shoots pushing through the earth. The chrysanthemums had survived. The peonies were coming back. Her mother's flowers, stubborn as the woman who'd planted them, refusing to surrender to Montana's cruelty. They made it, she called to Elias, who was working on the chicken coop. He came to look, dirt on his hands, and that smile she'd learned meant he was proud of something. Of course they made it. They're your mother's flowers. They don't know how to quit. Neither do we, apparently. Apparently not. They planted more that spring, expanded the garden, added new crops to the fields. The work was endless and exhausting, but they'd fallen into a rhythm that made the exhaustion bearable. Elias would start on fences at dawn while Linu attended the animals. She'd work the garden while he prepared the fields. They'd meet for lunch, simple food, but eaten together, and work through the afternoon side by side. The neighbors still watched, but the watching had changed. Less hostile now, more curious. The Turners, people called them that now, like they were a unit instead of a Chinese woman and her questionable husband, had survived a brutal winter. Their farm was actually producing. Their barns stood solid, their fences held, their crops were coming in. It was harder to dismiss success than failure. Mrs. Patterson started asking Linu for gardening advice. Mr. Henderson stopped making comments about interesting arrangements and started treating them like actual customers. Sheriff Morrison tipped his hat when they rode past. Small changes, gradual, but real. In May, Linu realized she'd missed her monthly bleeding, then missed it again. By June, she was certain. She told Elias while they were working in the garden, both of them on their knees pulling weeds. "I'm pregnant." His hands stopped moving. He sat back on his heels and looked at her like he wasn't sure he'd heard right. "You're pregnant. Maybe 3 months. I wasn't sure at first, but now I am." Elias's face went through several expressions: shock, joy, terror, before settling on something that might have been all three at once. "We're having a baby." "We're having a baby," Linu confirmed. "I don't know how to be a father. I don't know how to be a mother. We're going to be terrible at this." "Probably." He laughed, unexpected and genuine, then pulled her into his arms right there in the dirt. "We're going to be terrible at this together." Linu held him tight, feeling his heart race against hers. She was terrified, more terrified than she'd been of the storm, of trusting him, of any of it. Because this was new life, fragile and dependent, and she had no idea how to keep it safe in a world that had taken so much from her already. "What if I can't do this?" she whispered. "Then we'll fail together and try again tomorrow, like everything else." "That's not how babies work." "Then we'll figure out how babies work. Together." That word. Together. It had saved her more times than she could count. The pregnancy was hard. Linu worked through the morning sickness, through the exhaustion, through the fear that clawed at her every quiet moment. Elias watched her like she might break, which irritated her until she realized he was just as scared as she was. "I'm not made of glass," she snapped one afternoon when he tried to take a heavy basket from her hands. "I know that." "Then stop treating me like I am." "I'm not treating you like glass. I'm treating you like someone carrying our child who insists on working like she's trying to prove something." "I am trying to prove something, that I can still do this, that being pregnant doesn't make me useless." "No one thinks you're useless. Everyone always thinks I'm something, too weak, too foreign, too much trouble. Now I'm pregnant too, and people will assume I can't handle the farm, can't handle anything, need to be taken care of like a child myself." Elias set down the tools he was holding and looked at her directly. "Linu, you are the strongest person I know. Pregnant or not, sick or healthy, you're stronger than anyone in this town. But strength doesn't mean doing everything alone. It means knowing when to accept help." "I don't need help." "Fine, but I need to help. Not because you're weak, because watching you suffer when I could ease it makes me feel useless." He paused. "Let me help. Not for you. For me." She wanted to argue, but he was right, damn him. Pride was just another kind of wall, and she'd promised herself she'd stop hiding behind walls. "Fine, but I'm still working. I wouldn't expect anything less." The baby came in November, during a cold snap that froze water in the bucket overnight. Linu's labor started at dawn and lasted through the day into night. Mrs. Fletcher came, summoned by Elias despite Linu's protests, and brought experience and firm hands that knew what to do when Linu's body seemed determined to tear itself apart. Elias stayed through all of it, held Linu's hand when she screamed, wiped her face with cool cloths, whispered encouragement even when she cursed him for putting her through this. "I hate you," she gasped between contractions. "I know. This is your fault. I know. If I survive this, I'm never letting you touch me again. You'll change your mind." "I won't." But when the baby finally came, a girl, small but loud and furious at being born into the cold Montana night, Lin Yu forgot everything except the weight in her arms. Solid, real, alive. She's perfect, Elias breathed, tears streaming down his face. She's wrinkled and screaming. Perfect, he insisted. They named her Rose, after her mother's favorite flower, after the wild roses that grew against all odds in the garden, after the stubborn beauty that refused to die. The first months were brutal. Rose screamed at night, slept during the day, and seemed to need constant attention exactly when Lin Yu had work to do. Elias tried to help, but he was clumsy and uncertain, and the baby seemed to sense his fear and cry harder. "I don't know what I'm doing wrong," he said one night, rocking Rose, who shrieked like she was being murdered. "You're not doing anything wrong. She's just difficult, like her mother." Exactly like her mother. But gradually, impossibly, they figured it out. Elias learned to swaddle her tight the way she liked. Lin Yue learned which cries meant hungry versus tired versus just angry at the world. They took turns with night feedings, stumbling through exhaustion, surviving on love and stubbornness. The farm suffered that first year. They couldn't maintain it the way they had before. Fences went unrepaired, crops came in smaller. The garden grew wild because neither of them had time to tend it properly. But they survived. When Rose was 6 months old, Jenny Carter from the diner came to visit. She brought food, actual prepared food that Lin Yue didn't have to cook, and held the baby while Lin Yue ate something that wasn't cold or forgotten or stolen between tasks. "How are you managing?" Jenny asked. "Barely." "That's normal. My first nearly killed me. You learn as you go." "What if I'm learning wrong?" Jenny laughed. "There is no right way. There's just your way. And if your baby's fed and loved and still breathing, you're doing it right." It was the first time anyone in Corazon had treated Lin Yue like she was normal, like being a new mother struggling to keep her head above water was universal instead of proof that she was failing. "Thank you," Lin Yue said quietly. "For what?" "For treating me like a person instead of a problem." Jenny's face softened. "You've never been a problem, Lin, just different. And people here don't like different. But you've proven yourself. You and Elias both. Even the stubbornest folks are starting to see it." It wasn't forgiveness. Lin Yu didn't need forgiveness for existing. But it was acceptance, small and grudging, but real. Rose grew fast, reaching for everything, curious about the world in a way that terrified Lin Yue. Every sharp corner was a threat. Every step toward danger. She watched her daughter with the same intensity she'd once watched the horizon for storms. "You can't protect her from everything," Elias said, watching Lin Yue hover as Rose tried to pull herself up on furniture. "I can try." "If you try too hard, you'll smother her. Let her explore. Let her fall. She'll learn." "What if she gets hurt?" "Then she gets hurt and we help her heal. But Lin Yue, you can't keep her in a cage just because the world is dangerous." "I'm not trying to cage her." "Aren't you?" The question stung because it was true. Lin Yue had built walls to protect herself, and now she was trying to build them around her daughter too. But walls that kept danger out also kept life out. She thought about her mother, who'd tried so hard to shield Lin Yue from the ugliness of prejudice and hatred, who'd maintained grace and dignity and never let Lin Yue see how much it cost her, who'd died exhausted from the effort of protecting her daughter from truths that found her anyway. Lin Yue didn't want that for Rose. Didn't want her daughter to learn that hiding was safer than living. So she let Rose explore, let her fall and cry and get back up. Let her learn that the world could hurt, but also that she was strong enough to survive the hurting. When Rose was 2, another baby came. A boy this time, easier than his sister, quieter. They named him James, after no one in particular, just because they liked the sound of it. The farm expanded. They hired help during harvest, young men from town who needed work and didn't seem to care that their employer was Chinese. The money from crops was steady now, enough to save, to invest, to think about the future instead of just surviving the present. Lin Yue's garden became famous in the county. People came from 3 towns over to buy her flowers, her vegetables, her advice. She charged fair prices and gave honest answers, and slowly her mother's dream of a garden that flourished became real. The barn that she and Elias built stood strong through storms and seasons. They added on to it, then built a second, smaller barn. The fences they'd repaired so many times got replaced with better materials. The house got new windows, a new roof, rooms added for children who filled them with noise and life. Years passed. Rose grew tall and fierce, arguing with her mother about everything but working beside her in the garden anyway. James grew quiet and thoughtful, spending hours with his father learning to build, to fix, to make things with his hands. The town changed too. New families arrived, including other Chinese families who'd heard about the Turners and the farm they'd built against all odds. Linu helped them when she could. Advice, work, connections. Building a community where there'd been none. Mrs. Patterson died and her daughter took over the store. She was kinder, less quick to judge. Mr. Henderson retired and sold the feed store to a young couple from California who didn't care about anyone's ancestry as long as their money was good. Sheriff Morrison was replaced by a younger man who'd grown up watching the Turners prove everyone wrong and learned from it. Not everyone changed. Some people stayed bitter, stayed hateful, stayed convinced that people like Lin Yue didn't belong. But they were fewer now, quieter, less powerful. On their 10th anniversary, still counted from the kitchen wedding, still their real anniversary, Lin Yue and Elias stood in the garden that had grown into something magnificent. Flowers everywhere, vegetables thriving, fruit trees they'd planted together, bearing their first harvest. Rose was chasing James through the rows, both of them shrieking with laughter. The sound echoed across the farm, across the fields that were green and full, across the life they'd built from nothing. "Did you ever think we'd make it this far?" Lin Yue asked. "Honestly? No, I thought we'd be dead or divorced within a year. We almost were, several times. But we're not. No, we're not." Elias pulled her close, and she leaned into him, comfortable in a way she'd never been comfortable with anyone. He smelled like soil and sweat and home. "I was so angry when I met you," she said quietly. "At everyone. At the world. At myself for still caring when caring only ever hurt. I remember you were terrifying. I'm still terrifying. You really are." He kissed the top of her head. "But you're also happy, sometimes, when you think no one's looking." It was true. Happiness had crept up on her over the years, appearing in small moments she hadn't expected. Rose's first steps, James's first word. The moment she realized the farm would survive another winter. The morning she woke up and didn't immediately brace for disaster. Happiness wasn't constant. There were still hard days, still moments of doubt and fear, and the old anger that never completely disappeared. But it was there, woven through everything like gold thread through dark fabric. "What are you thinking?" Elias asked. "That I'm glad I answered your letter. That I'm glad I was reckless enough to trust you." "Just reckless? Brave might be too generous." "I think it was brave. The bravest thing either of us ever did." Lin Yue watched her children play, watched the garden bloom, watched the sun set over land that was finally, truly hers. She thought about this girl she'd been, angry and alone, convinced that walls were safety and love was weakness. She thought about her parents, who'd fought so hard for so little, who'd believed in dreams that never quite materialized. She thought about Daniel, who'd proven her worst fears right, and about the years she'd wasted protecting herself from a pain she'd experienced anyway. And she thought about the choice she'd made, to write back, to let someone in, to risk everything on honesty and partnership, and the radical idea that maybe she didn't have to survive alone. "I was wrong about love," she said. "What?" "When we met, I told you love was weakness, that it made people vulnerable and stupid and weak." "I remember. I was wrong. Love didn't make me weak. It made me brave. Brave enough to trust. Brave enough to try. Brave enough to build something instead of just protecting what little I had left." Elias turned her to face him. "Lin Yue Turner, are you getting sentimental? Don't make me regret it." "Never." He kissed her there in the garden, surrounded by beauty they'd created, with their children's laughter, the soundtrack to a life that shouldn't have worked but did, because they'd chosen it. Every day, through every hardship, they'd chosen each other and chosen to keep trying. That was the secret no one told you about survival. It wasn't about being strong enough to stand alone. It was about being brave enough to share the burden, to trust someone with your broken pieces and hope they didn't cut themselves, to build something bigger than yourself and weather the storms together. Rose ran up, demanding attention. James followed, muddy and grinning. Lin Yue scooped them both up. They were getting too big for this. But she did it anyway, and Elias wrapped his arms around all of them. A family, messy and imperfect and real. Everything she'd never let herself hope for and everything she needed. 10 years became 20. Their children grew into adults who knew their worth and fought for it. Rose became a teacher, fighting the same prejudices her mother had faced, but armed with education and righteous fury. James took over the farm, expanding it further, proving that the land that had nearly broken his grandparents could sustain generations. Linu's garden became a landmark. People came from across Montana to see it, to learn from it, to understand how something so beautiful could grow in such harsh conditions. "You made something impossible possible," a young woman told Linu one afternoon, walking through the rows of flowers. "Nothing's impossible, just difficult. There's a difference." "How do you keep going when everything's against you?" Linu thought about that, about the years of struggle, the moments of despair, the times she'd wanted to give up. "You find one person who believes in you, just one. And you hold on to them like they're the only thing between you and drowning. Then you build from there. One person becomes two becomes a family becomes a community. And suddenly you're not alone anymore. What if you can't find that person? Then you become that person for someone else. You be the one who believes, who stays, who fights." Linu touched one of her mother's chrysanthemums, still blooming after all these years. "My mother taught me that. She never gave up, even when she had every reason to. She kept planting these flowers every year, even though everyone told her they'd never survive Montana winters. And look at them now." The young woman looked at the flowers with new understanding. "They're still here. They're still here." Elias found Linu that evening, sitting on the porch they'd built together, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and rose. "Tired?" he asked, settling beside her. "Always." "Good tired?" "The best kind." They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching their land stretch before them. The barn they'd built, the fields they'd planted, the garden that refused to die, the home they'd created from nothing but stubbornness and hope. "Do you ever regret it?" Linu asked. "Regret what?" "Answering my letter, coming here, marrying an angry Chinese woman with a failing farm and more pride than sense." Elias laughed. "Not for 1 second. Do you regret writing to a desperate stranger advertising for a wife in a newspaper?" "Not even once. We were both out of our minds. Completely insane. Best decision I ever made." "Same." The sun dropped below the horizon and stars began appearing in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the house, their grandchildren, Rose's daughter and James's twin boys, were probably destroying something. They'd deal with it later. For now, this was enough. This moment of peace. This proof that fighting was worth it. Linu thought about the woman she'd been when she first stepped off that train platform, broken and angry, convinced she'd spend her life alone, certain that trust was for fools and love was a trap. She'd been so wrong about so many things. Love hadn't been a trap. It had been liberation. Trust hadn't made her weak. It had made her stronger than she'd ever been alone. And the day she'd chosen to answer a stranger's letter, the day she'd been reckless and brave and desperate enough to hope, that had been the day she'd finally chosen to live instead of just survive. "I love you," she said to Elias, the words easy now, worn smooth by years of saying them. "I love you too. Even though I'm old and cranky, especially because you're old and cranky. Good, because you're stuck with me. Wouldn't have it any other way." They sat on the porch as darkness fell, two people who'd found each other in the worst circumstances and built something beautiful anyway. Not perfect, never perfect, but real and lasting and worth every moment of struggle it had taken to create. The farm would go on. Their children would carry it forward. Their grandchildren would learn the lessons they'd learned, that strength comes in many forms, that community is built through persistence, that love is the bravest choice anyone can make. And somewhere in the garden, her mother's flowers bloomed in the darkness, stubborn and beautiful, refusing to surrender to the cold. Just like the woman who'd planted them. Just like the woman who'd kept them alive. Just like every person who'd ever chosen to fight instead of flee, to trust instead of hide, to build instead of break. The stars came out fully now, brilliant against the black Montana sky. Linu looked up at them and thought about her parents, about everyone who'd struggled and suffered and dreamed of something better, about all the people who'd told her she didn't belong and the few who'd seen her worth anyway. She belonged here, on this land, in this life, with this man and this family she'd built from broken pieces. She belonged, and no one could take that from her anymore. Elias squeezed her hand, and she squeezed back, and they sat together watching the night sky. Two survivors who'd learned that surviving was just the beginning. Living, really living, that was the victory. And they'd won.